Welcome back and good evening to Surrender or Reassign. And today I'm going to present to you a little moral because that's the way I sort of set it up. And everything is a little bit different, and different is good, right? Of course it is. If you don't keep growing, you might as well go into your backyard and dig a hole because growth is what keeps you alive. Enough nonsense. The ritual of the mouse and the giant. No beanstalks. Once upon a time, a tiny, overlooked country was barely hanging on. No money, no leverage, no power. It blended into the background like the quiet kid in school who hopes the bullies don't notice. But the leaders of this tiny nation understood something the big boys always forgot. When you're too small to win, you play by different rules. So they use the oldest trick in the global playbook. They declare WAR on a massive, wealthy country. Not to win, not to conquer, but to trigger the ritual. Because the moment the small country declared war, it could immediately perform the second half of the dance: total surrender. And in the ancient rules of geopolitics, when a small nation surrenders to a giant, the giant becomes the conqueror. And with conquest comes responsibility. The giant must now rebuild the small nation, pour money into its infrastructure, stabilize its government, and guide it toward the quote proper unquote system. The small country didn't win the war, it won the obligation. It weaponized its own weakness. And the giant, thinking it was in control, suddenly found itself trapped in commitments it never planned for. All because it followed the old rules without realizing the game had changed. The war that no longer pays. Once upon a time, war was profitable. Armies marched, factories roared, and the victors walked away with land, resources, and tribute. That was then. This is the 21st century, and here's where the cananker canaws. Instead, gas and diesel prices explode overnight. Food deliveries multiply in cost. Airlines across Europe and Asia cancel flights because fuel is too expensive. Grocery prices push past the ceiling. Citizens are told, drive less, eat less, don't buy anything you don't need. And the people on fixed incomes, the elders, the disabled, the ones who need help, well, they have a problem. The working poor, they're squeezed until they can barely breathe. And they need to choose between their prescriptions, rent, transportation, medical care, glasses, and the basic dignity of staying alive. Some can't even afford pet food anymore, not for their pets, but for themselves. And through all of this, Their government says, suck it up. But the people look around and ask, who is exactly doing this sucking up? Because the leaders who call for sacrifice are not the ones sacrificing. Their comforts remained untouched. Their privileges remain intact. When power forgets its limits. Remember the kings of old, King John, who pushed his nobles too far until they forced him to sign the Magna Carta, not because he wanted fairness, because he left them no choice. Power met consequence. Remember our founders who insisted on separating church and state, not because they lacked faith, because they'd seen what happens when rulers use religion as a weapon. Power met boundary. Remember Cuba, who discovered that switching political systems doesn't magically fix an economy? A new set of rulers can make the same old mistakes. Power met reality. And let's not forget the Middle Ages, when kings, emperors, dukes, earls, and knights lived in luxury while the peasants starved. Today, those titles mean nothing. Why? Because the nobility mortgaged their castle, turned them into tourist attractions, and watched their fortunes evaporate. Power met time. Even that famous PBS drama showed the truth. The great estate could only survive if the heir married a wealthy American socialite, not for love, for survival. And by the law, the estate passes to men, not women. Women lost the inheritance and were left with nothing unless they remarried. Power met law. It created. History keeps on repeating the same lesson. When leaders cling to old myths, old entitlements, and old systems, the world moves on without them. When rulers forget their people, the people eventually remind them. And when power refuses to adapt, it collapses under its own weight. This is not about personalities. It is about patterns. It is about consequences. It is about the price every society pays when those at the top forget that power is responsibility, not privilege. Thank you for joining us on this little moral tale. I hope you enjoyed it.